Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I am your host, well, one of them, Marlene. And with me is Bruce the botanist, my co-host.
Hello.
Say hello. And this is a new topic, a new monthly topic that we're going to incorporate. And this is our first one. We're going to do a top 10 list. I will give Bruce a topic. I guess you could come up with a topic every once in a while too. And sure. And then you're going to write your top 10. I'm going to do my top 10 and we won't see each other's. And then we'll reveal them and discuss them on the episode. How fun is that?
That sounds like lots of fun.
Doesn't it sound like lots of fun? So the first one is your top 10 biggest money wasters as far as what products should you not be spending your money on?
Right. And they'll be in no particular order except for our final one, which will be our number one waste of money in garden.
Yes, I should say that it's top 10, but I've added a bonus. And the bonus one will just be like, in this case, it's going to be a big money waster. So mine,
I'm going to save that to last.
Yes. So mine are pretty benign. It's not like they're going to make you they're going to, break the bank. I don't have anything huge, but if you just repeatedly buy them, there's no point. And some of them may be doing more harm. And really, most of the time, they're just not doing anything.
Right.
So I'm going to break down some of the science. And, I have no idea what's on your list. If we happen to have the same one.
I'm sure we'll have at least one that's the same. And if not, then they get 20 top 10s.
There you go.
Better.
Yeah. So we're just going to go through them. Some of them we might discuss a little bit longer. I have some papers printed out, some scientific papers printed out that I will probably read. Well, yeah, because I can't remember all this. I can barely remember my name. So why don't you get started? So Bruce, you are going to give, like we said, no particular order, except for it's not your big reveal. One that you think people just waste money on for whatever particular reason.
Sure. Well, this is one that really bugs me, which is people buy vegetable seedlings of peas and beans and carrots. And to me, that's a complete waste and corn for several reasons. The number one reason it's a big waste is because when you plant peas, you need to plant, not 6. You need to plant a lot of peas to get a crop. Carrots, on the other hand, don't transplant well. So again, not only do you need to have a lot of carrots to get a decent crop, but they're not even going to do well when you transplant them to begin with. So many people buy plants of seeds that you're actually going to do much better if you direct sow them in the ground. And that, to me, it's a money saver because after all, part of the reason you garden is to save a little money. And they're going to give you healthier plants. So that's my number one.
Okay, I can't disagree. Yes, anything that has like a taproot is its primary form. You have to be careful about transplanting because if they get too big and you snap it off, they don't transplant well. And say each cell has say 3 peas in it. If you plant them all together, that might be too close. But if you divide them, you might be disturbing the roots and you end up maybe with 1. But yeah, they germinate so easy as long as you protect them from birds and you don't even need direct sow them. You could start them just on paper plates or paper towels and, get them going. Yeah.
But why even would you do that? I mean, I just dig my little trench. Years ago, I had there used to be a television show called Crockett's Victory Garden. And Crockett's attitude was, you never want to plant the peas as far apart as they say in the packet. I take the entire small packet, which is maybe 50 peas or less. I dig my little trench. It's 4 inches by maybe 6 to 8 feet, depending on where I am. And I just throw them all in, cover it up, sometimes use the bacterial inoculant, which we can talk about, sometimes don't. And they always grow. And it's a waste of your time. And it's certainly a waste of your money to buy peas or even beans, anything you need to have a lot of to get a decent crop. or things that don't transplant.
I agree with you on that one. Okay.
Yep.
Because I might disagree with you, and you could disagree with me on some of them. You'll be wrong, but you could still disagree.
Yeah, it makes me feel good.
Oh, there you go. Okay. My first one is calcium sprays for blossom end rot.
Ah,
Yes. So blossom end rot, I've talked about it a lot, that it's that big blotchy brown at the bottom of a tomato, could also be on peppers. That's caused by the lack of calcium getting to the fruit. It's almost never a lack of calcium in the soils. So people buy the sprays, they spray it on. Their next set of tomatoes won't have it. That's just because there's calcium there. It's just early in the season. The water, the temperatures, the plant's not utilizing and taking the calcium. It's a one-way movement for calcium from the soil to the fruit. And if you spray on the fruit, it does not get taken into the fruit.
mhm.
And it really doesn't even get taken into the leaves and move into the fruit. So that is a big waste. People say, well, I sprayed it and my second set didn't have it. That's just a coincidence as the temperatures and, sort of stabilized and the moisture stabilized. So do not buy the calcium sprays.
And, I have discovered that Roma tomatoes are more prone to blossom end rot than your bigger tomatoes, and then your non-Roma tomatoes.
That is correct. I don't know.
And-
I don't like the taste of Roma. They're pretty bland.
Well, I was growing tomatoes to make paste, to make sauce.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of course, didn't realize that was going to be a problem. And sure enough, at the beginning of the season, before I realized I was underwatering, it was just a complete waste of tomato. Every single one of them had to be tossed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Some years are worse, and some years it seems like it never stabilizes for whatever reason, but some are more sensitive. But yeah, don't get the calcium sprays, and don't obviously add eggshells. That's a whole different thing. But no calcium sprays. Okay, next one.
Okay, I have one which is buying compost starter. You see this in the stores any time of the year, often in the fall, because that's when you have all your leaves falling. And supposedly it has beneficial microorganisms to get your compost going and get it hot or whatever they claim it's going to do. But the reality is that there's so much bacteria in your soil that you don't need to spend $10 on a box of bacteria, which I don't even know what's in there, but it doesn't make a difference.
No, and I think some of the mycorrhizae is probably dead.
Yeah.
If it was even in there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No,
That's a quick and easy one.
Yeah, I agree. If you have the moisture, you have your balance of carbon and your greens, and it gets hot enough. Yeah, there's enough stuff. There's enough microorganisms. Yeah.
And if you're doing
Bacteria.
leaves, well, they're not going to get hot anyway. And they do take a while to break down. But frankly, again, all you have to do is put the leaves in a pile, mix some soil in with it. You're going to have enough microorganisms in there.
Yep. No, I agree with that one. Okay, so no compost starter. Okay, I agree with that one.
Okay.
All right, my next
2 for 2.
I know. Well, really. My next one is B1 for transplants. Yeah, so that big blue jug that you see on the end caps. Now, this thing's been around for a while. Now, this is where this started. So B1 or thiamine. Apparently, the theory is that it stimulates root growth. So when you transplant and you've damaged the roots, you don't want your plant to go into transplant shock. So you apply B1. Well, apparently what happened was in 1949, they were doing research on auxin, which is a plant growth hormone responsible for root formation, and vitamin B1 and other stuff. And they found that the root development treated with one of these preparations contained auxin and thiamine. But then they realized that it's just the auxin that did it and not the thiamine, the B1. So, but for some reason, someone marketed it and it's like, oh, B1. So plants produce, so basically it is important in apparently tissue culture, but healthy plants synthesize their own thiamine. So more is not necessarily better. Healthy soils contain beneficial microbes that also synthesize thiamine as well. So if you pour it in, it's not going to do anything better. And I've said the best way to reduce transplant shock is to not transplant when it's 100, obviously. Right. Try to get as big of a root ball, or not, tease the roots. But if you're digging something up and moving it, try to get as big of a root ball. Do a wide hole, and of course, water in thoroughly. And I always tell people that you want to do it when it's actively growing or completely dormant when it's sort of in just sort of this no mode. And because the auxin that they show does stimulate root growth is being produced in active new growing tips. So no B1 because it has been proven not to do anything and when it's added to the soil.
And that was on my list.
Really? Okay.
It was. And what I had also in that was homeopathic supplements. Now, I know homeopathy is a real debatable issue, but when you look at it scientifically, because I had a homeopathic supplement that was supposed to help prevent my plants from freezing. Needless to say, it didn't work. But a homeopathic supplement, what it really does is they take whatever compound they're talking about for that particular supplement, they dilute it, and they call it a 24x dilution, which means nothing more than they keep on diluting and then taking that solution, diluting again. And so by the time you're done, a gallon of your solution might have one molecule of the actual compound that it started with. So, and that one molecule may or may not find itself to that one molecule in your tomato.
Yeah.
So those, homeopathic supplements along with the vitamin supplements, it's just a waste of your money and a waste of time.
Yeah. So far we're just saying if you have a healthy soil, you with your compost inoculate, me with the B1 or you with the B1 too, it's just having a healthy overall good soil is going to be the best thing. And we've mentioned, or I've mentioned how to do that, and we'll have a soils conversation down the road.
Sure. I mean, soil is,
key.
The most important thing in a sense, obviously, is your plants being healthy, but you're growing it in soil. And if your soil isn't healthy, then you're not going to have healthy plants.
Okay, next.
Okay, so I have one about fertilizers, which is buying specially labeled fertilizers like orchid fertilizer or African violet fertilizer. As I say, it's not the name, it's what's in the bag. And you should look, when you look in a bag of fertilizer, you'll see what they call the NPK numbers, which are the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium content of the fertilizer. And you'll also see micronutrients. You will notice that the expensive orchid fertilizer probably has the exact same ratio as some of the inexpensive plant fertilizers. I will also say that I do buy a specially formulated fertilizer for hibiscus, but notice the key word is formulated. Again, it's not that it says it's for hibiscus, it's that it has properties that in this fertilizer that suit the hibiscus very well. While we're on the topic, a lot of people go plants from the Protea family, and they do not like phosphorus. So again, if you buy a fertilizer that says it's specifically for Proteas, what you're really looking for, again, is does it have too much phosphorus? It should have very little, if none. And again, it's not because they call it Protea fertilizer. It's because it has the proper formulation that particular plant needs. So just be careful over the label, the name of the label.
Okay, so my next one is pretty dang similar, but I focused more on bloom fertilizer. So when you go and you see, just sort of like with the orchids and even the African violets, you'll see them, or just something labeled bloom fertilizer, and then you'll see that NPK. It could be as much as 0.50 or 0.50, and you see this a lot in fertilizers for cannabis industry. Because, of course, they want the blooms. Right. So the idea is, you start off with a high nitrogen to get the green going, and then you switch to a high phosphorus fertilizer because phosphorus is, quote, responsible for producing blooms. Now, this is sort of debunked. Once again, a plant isn't going to take more and do more with what you give it. I always say when you give a plant more of a certain nutrient, it's sort of like us when we take vitamins. If we don't need them, our kidneys will flush them out, and it's a waste. Unfortunately, with fertilizers, it's not as just simple as that. So especially with bloom fertilizers, which are high phosphorus, apparently there's a big problem with phosphorus just soil's being over phosphorized, right? And it's killing off mycorrhizae, and it's harmful to beneficial soil organisms, and it'll eventually find its way into waterways. And that could induce algae blooms. And of course, we know that's a problem with keeping things in balance. So really just giving your plant more of a bloom. If a plant is happy, it's going to bloom. Giving it more isn't going to bloom more. So you're adding all this phosphorus for the soil, and it has, it's creating more problems. So, and whereas nitrogen gets leached out fast. A plant utilizes it a lot, uses it as a plant grows. But yeah, these bloom fertilizers, they're not going to all of a sudden, if you apply it, for one, it's not going to be next week you're going to get more bloom. So it's funny about when they say get the plant big, give it right when the plant's big enough. Say you give it to a dahlia and you expect in 2 weeks it's going to take that and make it bloom. No, that's not the way it works.
Well, I'm going to plead guilty because I do use blossom boosters on my plants. However, I'm thinking that it's really a question of, are you applying too much nitrogen so that the plant is growing more leaves at the expense of flowers? Is that also debunked, or does that make sense?
I want to say, and I still sort of say that, but I almost say that's a debunk thing. I think, because you could say, oh, a plant, there's a thing where it's like, oh, this plant's happy, it's flowering. Oh, this plant's stressed, it's flowering, doing its last hurrah. Or this plant's not flowering because I gave it so much nitrogen. And I'm not saying no, because I haven't read the science on that. But I imagine that what it's doing more is when you it could be, I don't know what the nitrogen binds up. There's that Mulder's chart where it shows the antagonistic sort of nutrients, how they interact.
Right.
So I think like if you add too much magnesium, I think it binds up calcium.
Yes, I've seen that chart, and it's a little complicated to look at it. And pH is very much a part of that chart.
Very important, yeah. So I think because nitrogen could be leached out so fast and it's used so fast that it's difficult to over nitrogen your plants. But I don't know if someone definitely sends a question saying, I fertilize every week my tomatoes and I'm not getting any blooms. The first thing I'll tell them to do is stop fertilizing. Is that because there's a direct correlation? I don't know. But if your plant is healthy and big enough, it should bloom. It should bloom. And of course, there's other factors. But this is a science-based that phosphorus lingers in the soil. It kills off microorganisms, and it can get into the waterways. And that adding more and more to it is not going to make a plant bloom more. I mean, imagine if you added it to a one-time flowering forsythia. Is it going to make that forsythia bloom more throughout the season?
No. But you'll say, "Wow, I used it, and the next spring it really bloomed." And they do bloom.
I mean, they do bloom, and I mean, they're possible. It's really hard, I think, to have phosphorus deficient soils. You're talking about the proteas, but most of the time when you have nutrient deficiencies, they're very sandy, because that's where things just get sort of leached out and they don't have a good nutrient holding capability.
Right.
So I don't know. That's one, is the bloom fertilizer. And I'm just reading more and more about that.
Well, I do use it on my things that I want to grow for flowers, but I'm going to say something a little different. What I'm essentially doing is buying something that's low in nitrogen, again, with the concept of I don't want the leaves to overgrow the flowers. Is that anecdotal and not real? It might be. But I generally just feed with 20-20-20 at a very low dose every time I remember.
Yeah, a balanced.
In the summer, it's all the time.
Yeah, a balanced fertilizer.
Right.
Yeah, but a 0.50 going, oh my God, I'm not going to give it any nitrogen. I'm going to give it a 50. It's going to make them bloom.
Yeah, that would bother me. I mean, to me, that would be a good opportunity for, like you say, over fertilizing and maybe hurting the plant, because there's so much of they're all basically salts. And so you're basically adding a salt to your plant. And 50 is high.
50 is high. And to show that it kills off other things that are beneficial, really. I mean, the mycorrhizae and all the microorganisms are so beneficial. More so than just you're giving your plant that fertilizer.
Right.
Okay, next one for you.
Well, my next one is similar because we're on the topic of fertilizer. It's buying pre-mixed fertilizers, liquid fertilizers. So now liquid fertilizers are basically things that you can spray into your plant, or you can just take a teaspoon of it. It's already pre-mixed. And I think they will tell you to just pour it directly into the plant or mix it with water and pour it in. But frankly, the whole issue of pre-mixed fertilizers is that they're doing the work for you by pre-mixing it instead of taking a powder or that you mix yourself. And you're paying for them to do that for you. That's number one. Number two is you're getting a bottle which might cost you, I'm going to say $10 for a bottle of pre-mixed fertilizer, or you can spend $15 for a box with a bag in it of powdered fertilizer, and you're going to get a lot more fertilizer. So ultimately, is the convenience of having someone pre-mix and put it into a 8-ounce bottle worth it to you?
Yeah.
I say no.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. But that might be someone's it's so much more convenient. I don't know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always say, is mixing the fertilizer in a container too much work for you? Mm-hmm. If so, maybe you should not be gardening.
I know that's sort of similar to any ready-to-use, the soap sprays or anything.
Sometimes, I do. You know what? I buy the bottle of pre-mixed soap spray so that I have a bottle. And then I buy the container of concentrate, and I mix it up and add it to my now empty pre-mixed soap spray. So the point is, I have a bottle that's labeled. I've paid for the bottle. And I could just buy a regular blank bottle and label it. But in my case, I'm lazy enough that I'd rather have a bottle that says it's got the product in it with all the information of the product that I buy to refill it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. That is, I think they're like, hey, maybe you have one small plant and you just want to grab it and spray it and keep it right there. And you don't want to have to get a second container to,
Right.
Yeah.
And I do always have my pre-mixed things that I have mixed up myself in those original bottles. I have it lying around my plant area. So when I see something, I have it just there to spray. I don't have to go and mix them up.
Okay. Well, I am going to, apparently a lot of ours are with fertilizers, because I'm going to continue with, we'll get out of fertilizers, but and this goes along the lines of bloom fertilizer is bulb starter. So you get your bulbs and you put a little handful of the bulb starter that they always try to upsell you, right? Or is it upsell, or what is the, when you,
upsell sounds good.
Upsell, or there's like a little, sell that's like, oh, you're buying bulbs. Do you need this? Oh, you're buying a plant. Do you need soil? Do you need a pot? So bulb starter, most of the time it is like bone meal. You can either buy bulb starter or bone meal, and they're basically a phosphorus based one. So I have a article from University of Illinois Urbana, is it Champaign? Their extension. But this is funny because this is actually from Washington State. They quote, according to Washington State University, the plant root's relationship with mycorrhizal fungi may be more efficient in extracting phosphorus from the soil than adding bone meal. The addition of bone meal actually prevents the organic acid exuding from the root tips, a condition that occurs in a lower phosphorus environment, preventing mycorrhizae from penetrating the roots. So for people who don't know what mycorrhizae is, it's a fungal that will sort of attach to the roots, and it acts similar as a secondary root system of the plant. So it sends out its feeder, quote, roots, and allows more water and nutrients to be picked up. That is the most basic I could explain it, but it's good. And so if you add more phosphorus, we know it's hurting the fungi. And in this case, it's probably better that you don't even add it, because, bulbs themselves, the whole point of a bulb is to have that storage of that energy and sugar for it to grow.
Right.
So if you're adding it there, is it really utilizing that? And say you're maybe lacking phosphorus?
And because
But
every fall, or spring, or whenever I feel like it, if I have some bone meal left over, I'll throw it over the bulbs just when they start to emerge. And I do feed my bulbs with fertilizer during the growing
I
season.
can't believe that. So
I
dedicated.
will, I am dedicated, and I'm crazy, but
And you're
I
retired.
think,
And you're retired.
but I think that if you just want to plant, let's just say tulips, which we've had a discussion on, forgetting the whole pre-cooling and everything, but just more, you want to display next spring. Just plant the bulbs. You're going to get a display or not, but fertilizing is not going to do anything because the fertilizing and the bone meal is for the following year anyway.
If that, in fact, is going to help. Yes, but you don't need to do it when it starts right there.
Right. So, and that's what I'm getting at. You may never get tulip flowers to bloom, but you're not going to get them to bloom better by fertilizing when you plant them. The bud is already in the tulip.
Yes, correct. Okay, good. I'm glad we agree on, except for, the bloom fertilizer, you're like, a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm still looking at more of the science of that. Okay.
Right, and I'll admit that most of my bloom fertilizers are in potted plants.
Yeah.
I only this couple of years started fertilizing my bulbs, and frankly, maybe if I just did 20-20-20, it would be just as good.
Maybe, yeah. Okay, next one, Bruce.
Oh, I have maintaining a grass lawn.
Oh, good one.
Back when I used to live in the old country, everybody had lawns, but we had 4 inches of rain every month, like clockwork. And if it didn't rain for 30 days, that was a drought. So I feel that when you're living here, having a lawn, you have a very small property often here compared to other areas. So number one is, why do you want to waste what little space you have on a lawn? Number two is, we're always in a water deficit, even when we're not. So why do you want to use water to maintain a lawn? Because lawns are very thirsty. Number three is, it's work. So what I moved into my new house and I discovered that I have a green patch of land, but it's not a lawn. It's essentially a lawn of mixed weeds. And by weeds, I mean, there's little seedlings there. There's oxalis, there's clover, there's a bunch of privet seedlings which get mowed down.
How darling.
It's green, and it's really all I want. And by the way, I never fertilize it.
Yeah.
So it's better for the environment because I don't have to fertilize it. Is it as lush as a lawn? No, but it's green and easier to maintain. And even when I have bone dry spots, they come right back and they don't even brown off too much, as people's lawns do when they have dry spots.
Yeah. I mean, lawns, especially, I understand. I'm not going to tell someone who has young kids not to have a lawn in the backyard because I grew up playing on grass.
Right. And we all did if we're over 50 or almost 50.
Exactly. So I'm not going to tell someone no, but you just said you don't even have a true grass. You have green that you just mow. And then the summer you might add some water. It doesn't need to be people who fixate on the perfect lawn and they add, the fertilizers and they do the fungicides and they
the
have
weed killers.
And the weed killers. I mean, there's so much toxicity going into that and they expect it to be perfect. Or people who have it in their front yard, but there's no kids and no one's playing on it. Right. I mean, I don't understand that. I grew up, my dad we had Bermuda.
And Bermuda, of course, is the scourge of all gardeners here.
Yes, but my dad is like, it dies off in the winter, but it's great because it's low water. And I'm like, and it spreads. And I'm like, yeah, it spreads. All right.
Yeah. I mean, there's a product called bear grass, which is in the Bermuda grass family. They claim it's not as invasive, but, I think I look at it as, if you've ever had let's just say like a wedding and it's on a lawn, you'll notice by the end of the day, the grass is it's smushed, it's compacted, there are areas where for whatever reason it's been trampled enough that it starts to become like a slurry. If you go onto my lawn of weeds, I had a party a while ago and people walking over, there's no damage at all because they're tough.
Yeah. Yeah, there's other things there's the the Lipia, which is the lawn substitute. that grows like crazy.
And it flowers.
Yeah, it flowers, and most people don't have a perfect lawn anyways. No, I agree. It is time consuming and it's expensive if you're trying to get it. I mean, just mowing it, you need a lawnmower. You need a trimmer.
Yeah.
All that.
Right.
Yeah. And then
I have a lawnmower. I have the robotic lawnmower.
Yes.
And you know what it's really doing? It mows for about an hour 4 times a week. All it's really doing is cutting off the clover flower heads and making them level so that it doesn't look messy.
Mhm.
But it's not really mowing. And frankly, I could probably do it once every 2 weeks if I wanted to. But it's fun to have the mower turn itself on and
it's pretty funny.
walk and go around the property it's 4 times a week.
It's a lawn Roomba.
It's a lawn Roomba.
I remember when I saw that, I'm like, what is that in your backyard? You're like, oh, it's a lawn Roomba. I'm like, oh my God.
When I moved into the neighborhood and I started meeting my neighbors, I met them because they saw the lawnmower moving. So it really is a great way to make friends and
you should have
make connections in your neighborhood.
You should have put like a skeleton on it to make it look like or a ghost. You could have a ghost going in Halloween. It looks like, woo.
Or maybe a giant chicken,
Yeah, maybe something on it. So they're like, whoa. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to switch. I still have a few fertilizer things, but I'm going to switch it just so it's a little bit different. I'm going to go with small tomato cages. The tomato cages you buy at the store. Now, most people, when they send me pictures of their tomatoes, unless they're suffering, are huge. And for some reason, they sell these small tomato cages. And I don't know why for years and years and years, people buy these small tomato cages. Yeah. I understand storage is an issue, but you could just buy stakes and stake them around and put some string around to hold it in and make your own. And that's less. But these tomato cages, they fall over because you plant them and you put them in when they're small. And then by the time they get big, they're flopped over. And then it's really hard to control the tomato.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons why people buy the small tomato cages. Number one is the big ones are expensive and the small ones are cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But the other problem is they don't even last 2 years because the wells come apart.
Exactly.
So I use them actually as pepper cages.
No, I do too. Yeah.
To me, peppers are in the tomato family. Yeah. So why not throw the peppers in a cage? And I think it keeps them, to me, it just makes them stay a little bit more dense and more organized. And also, it's easier. Now that I learned you have to shade peppers here, it's easier to shade them if you have a little cage.
Mm-hmm. No, the tomato cages for the peppers and flowers, even dahlias work. But, you could go to Tractor Supply and buy some of the cattle fencing. And if you don't have storage to store them when they're circular, just zip tie them closed. And then unzip tie them and they lay flat up against a wall. I
actually put my dahlias in the big tomato cages, but I still stake them because even in the big tomato cages, they still flop over.
Yeah, that's dahlias for you. We discussed today that we don't like to prune our dahlias.
No, we had a little dahlia discussion earlier, and pruning dahlias to me just means later flowers.
Exactly.
Although this year I did try a little bit of an experiment with disbudding them.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do, but you get 3 flowers sometimes per node. You get the big one, which is the first one, and then you get a teeny little one, and then you get a third one. So I'll take off the teeny little one, and then the third one will bloom, hopefully, while the first one is
so
fading.
tough. I can't even do that with they tell you to do that with peppers. I can't even do that with peppers.
Yeah.
And dahlias, I can't imagine doing that because you're like, oh, but anyways.
Well,
your dahlias look gorgeous.
And you don't feel as bad.
Yeah, your dahlias look gorgeous. So you're doing something right. Okay, your turn.
Oh, well, one last fertilizer thing is buying compost. Some people, they have the compost in the big bags. There is 2 reasons why I don't buy that. First of all, you can make your own, although it can take between a few months and a couple of years to make it. But the reality is so many municipalities now offer free compost to the residents. And Sac County, if you're not a resident, no one's stopping you anyway. So I go over to the one, I think we mentioned this last time, there's a place in Gibson Ranch, and it's beautiful compost. It's still steaming when you get it. why would I buy it when I can buy it get it for free? So I just say don't buy compost unless if you have a source of free compost, don't make it, don't buy it, make it
and some people will say, well, I don't have a truck, but you could bring buckets or you could bring garbage bags and put them in there.
And plenty of people, frankly, they don't want you to use your truck because that's not fair to the people who don't have that much space on their truck to take it. Yeah. I take 15-gallon pots, stick them in the trunk, fill them in, then go about a couple of weeks later saying, why is my trunk filled with garbage? Dirt.
Yes. It's good stuff. That's why.
But it's great stuff.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes. Okay. Mine is similar to your bagged compost. Mine is bagged bark. Mm-hmm. So this is where a lot of people, and I noticed you had a big dump truck load full of bark.
I did.
In your driveway. And we could discuss that because it was very similar to the bagged bark. Now, I understand.
It is the bagged bark out of a bag.
I know. So I understand it looks really nice when you put it down. Ooh, I mean, it's just like, the finishing touch, the icing on the cake. It makes everything look really good. But the whole idea is laying, for me, and as what I tell people, is laying something on top of the soil is to act as a barrier for water being, evaporation, and ideally breaking down, and ideally getting, the soil a little bit cooler. And so if you lay it on just very sparse, or you get the bark, even though I know it's not a toxic dye, but some of the bagged bark have, they're dyed. I'm just trying to, and I get it. It looks really nice. But if you're going to do a mulch, don't go for the bagged bark. You'd get, a big truckload, which is good because then you could put it on thicker. So if you do it 3 to 5 inches thick, you are getting the benefits of preventing that evapotranspiration. You're keeping the soil cooler. But I always tell people, get it from the tree companies. For the most part, if you can.
Now, I have a little bit of an issue with that. First of all, again, it's free. But if they're cutting down trees that have died due to infections, and that's a lot of the big reason why people have their trees removed, then you're getting that fungus and you're spreading it on your soil.
Yeah, but so first of all, I have to break it to you. A lot of times now it's not free.
Well, well.
And I joke that the lists are very long, but if you could catch a tree company in your neighborhood and say, hey, you don't have to go to the dump and dump that. Can you bring it to my house? And you give them, and then there's that chip app where you just pay a little bit for the people, it's your choice of how much you want to pay. And I get it. Not everyone needs a whole truckload full of wood chips. I get that. I do want to bring that up. But I would say if you were doing it for a compost or even just a nice finishing touch, go, like you mentioned, to the municipalities and get the free compost. Because one, that looks really nice. Yeah. And two, if it's free, and then you can lay it on thicker. So why did you go with the bark?
Well, I have the compost too, but I wanted the bark because I wanted it for the look, and also I am doing about 3 inches. Okay. So it is going to help to prevent the evaporation. And I did do the bags, which was a mistake because it's just so not cost effective. And the first thing I bought in the bags was actually the shredded cedar. Now, there's pluses to that. I find that it's much more effective at keeping weeds down. But I also find that if you want to dig even through there, it really blocks a spade from going through the bark versus the shredded redwood or cedar. Yeah. Very hard to get the spade through, which is probably why it's also hard for the weeds to come through.
Yeah. No, and it creates that mat, sort of like what straw and hay does, right?
Right. And it doesn't look pretty to me.
No. Oh, I mean, the bark does look nice. And the gorilla hair, I think what they call it. Yeah. So I don't know. I just, the bag bark, yes, you can if it makes more sense to buy bagged than, of course, bulk, or you really like the look and you don't want to go get free compost, just get enough to lay it on top. And I would avoid the dyed ones.
Oh, I would never buy the dyed ones. First of all, I think, frankly, this might offend people. I think it's tacky looking.
Yeah.
black
This is
bar.
our podcast. We could discuss our opinions on fashion, and if that's bark fashion, then so be it, right?
But you mentioned the compost. The compost is pretty rich. I wouldn't put 3 inches on it, but let's just say I put 1.5 inches or so of that compost. Is that going to be too much for my plants?
Well, it was funny because you were saying you're getting the compost and it was still like steaming.
It was still steaming.
So it might be really hot still, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, it is hot, but by the time it goes onto my ground, of course, it's cooled. But I'm more concerned it might be like overfeeding.
No, but broken down compost should be totally fine to, yeah. No.
Good to know.
It's fine if it's broken down. Yeah.
Alrighty then.
Okay, that was mine. It's your turn.
Purchasing extra large tomato or other vegetable seedlings. You'll go to the plant stores and you'll see if you can still find them, you'll find 6 packs of tomatoes for maybe $5. You'll find the single packs in like 3 or 4 inch pots for maybe also $5. And then you'll find these gallon or bigger tomatoes for maybe $35 or $40. The difference between a 4-inch pot tomato and a 1 gallon pot tomato is probably 2 to 4 weeks. Unless you're buying it in August because you totally didn't plant anything. I think it's just a total waste of money. And when it comes to other plants like melons, you don't want to buy a melon in a big pot anyway because melons really need to spread. Why would you want to buy a plant that's been confined to that little pot for let's just say a month? So I think that's a total waste of money. Okay,
well, I guess we're on the same page, but I expanded that to basically any plant, anything bigger than, say, depending on the plant, 4-inch, 1 gallon, or 5 gallon. So the idea is you see a shrub and you buy it in a 15 gallon for way more than, say, a 5 gallon.
Right.
Way more. A lot of times they're not necessarily you're paying for the root ball. I mean, I'm sure you've done the same thing too, where you buy a gallon plant and you take it out and the root ball's still in the shape of the 4-inch pot.
And that's frustrating because there's probably been more damage done to the root system by putting it into there a week ago than taking a healthy plant in a 4-inch pot and going directly into your soil.
And then you just paid for that extra big pot and the extra soil, and you didn't pay for a bigger plant.
Right.
Now, and I also equate it to someone who's moving after living in a house for 1 year, resettles, and it's easier than moving someone who's lived in the same house for 40 years, uprooting literally, figuratively.
Yeah.
So yes, I understand people like, well, I want a bigger plant right away. They've done studies where, yes, for maybe the first 2 years, you're going to have a bigger plant. But then that smaller plant with the smaller root system gets adjusted so fast that it catches up to that tree, that shrub in almost 3-4 years.
Now, I will say there are some exceptions for super slow growing plants like palms or even cycads, where you can get the $20 cycad, which has 2 leaves on it, or you can get the $500 cycad, which looks beautiful. And the $500 cycad could be 30 years old for all you know. These things grow extremely slowly.
Well, yes, you could buy one of our Welwitschia seedlings at work for $100. That's maybe 6 months old. Or you could offer us, $10,000 for one that's 12 years old.
And of course, that makes sense. But that's if you're 80 years old and you want to put in a Chilean wine palm, you want to spend the $10,000 so you can actually see it look like something, because otherwise your grandchildren may see it look good.
Well, your grandchildren are going to be like, you just wasted $10,000 on a palm. Hello, Grandpa.
Well, here's the thing. Gramps, the little bit, goes to the family and says, look, kids, I can leave you $10,000 or I can have this beautiful palm. And the children say, oh, Grandpa, you should have the palm.
And then somehow Grandpa's dead the next day.
Yeah, with a palm frond hitting him over the head.
Exactly.
So and by the way, I actually once did an experiment, and apparently it's still on the internet somewhere, where I took eucalyptus seedlings. This was actually in New York. I think I had 3 types, same plant, but just 3 different size pots. I had some in 6 the little flats,
Mm-hmm.
the 6 pot flats. I had some in 4-inch pots and some in 4-inch that were overgrown, and they were the root balls were too tight, and they were underpotted. As it turns out, the smallest ones grew at the end of the season bigger than any of the bigger
Wow.
potted, and certainly
Mm-hmm.
better than the one that had a tight root ball.
Yeah. No, I mean, when I've bought roses and lavenders and hibiscus, and I take cuttings, because that's, a money saver, is you buy one plant and you take cuttings and you're like, oh, this is going to take forever. Within 3 years, with lavender, it was like 1 year. With certain like hibiscus, you're like, I can't remember what was the original mother plant.
And with tomatoes, even. I mean, I had a tomato. I was staking my tomato, and I broke off the stem, and I said, "Gee, I want more of this one." I just stuck it in the ground last month, and it's caught up to the others.
Yeah, the giant tomato plants. The only reason I could think of is people want that instant garden look. Maybe, I don't know, or they think they're going to get tomatoes faster, but they're not, because the plant has to establish.
Right.
It's not going to want to set fruit when it's stressed. So
yeah. I think that there are people who it makes them feel good to buy a plant with big tomatoes on it. And you know what? It's your money. We say these are wastes of money to us.
Oh, yeah.
But ultimately, it's your money. If you want to buy a $10,000 palm or a $50 tomato plant, be my guest. But if you want to put your money into the things that matter, there are other areas where you could put your money into other than plants that are overgrown.
I mean, I should have this as one, and this should be my largest money waster, is buying plants in pots, not being ready to plant them and not watering them and having them die.
Well, here, we could also say the biggest money waster for us is buying plants.
There we go.
Period.
There we go. Yes. But still, you buy a plant and you're like, oh, I'll get to that right away.
Oh,
and then you're like,
I've done so much of that.
Oh my God, we all have. That's a big money waster. So really be ready first before you buy. But that's not on my list. Okay. My next one is organic weed sprays.
Oh, that's so interesting, because I'm going to say my next one was going to be organic pre-emergence.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
You go first.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, glyphosate, Roundup, which works so well, is because it translocate into the plant and it moves down to the roots and it kills the whole entire plant. Now, organic sprays do not do that. Now, most of the organic sprays are made up of different oils. And I think it could be like citrus oil. What is it? Clove oil.
Clove oil.
Yeah. Cinnamon oil, D-limonene, which is like a citric acid. That's what most of them are. And so I'm looking at the UC Weed Science page, which is, really good at their research. And their quote right here is, for larger or perennial weeds. So you're talking about larger annuals or perennial weeds, and perennial weeds are weeds that come back year after year. Organic herbicides generally will only damage or burn the top growth of the weed, and after a couple weeks, the weeds regrow. And they show that if you spray it more and more, it actually gets less effective. So
that's very interesting.
So it really doesn't. So say you have a perennial plant or perennial weed. Let's say, bindweed, of course, is my go-to one, which, that one's even hard for Roundup to kill on the first go round. But say you spray it, it will just burn the top, either a decent amount or a bit. And then the plant's like, got my good root system, I'm coming right back. If you have a large annual, say like Lactuca, in the Asteraceae family, if it's too large, it'll do the same thing. Now, where it works is probably on very small annual or even perennial seedlings when they're little. But my feeling is just take the hula hoe when they're small or even medium and just decapitate them.
Yes.
So really, there's not the perfect organic herbicide out there. And it says, in general, most weeds began to regrow or recover about 2 weeks after treatment. Multiple successive treatments were made after regrowth was observed. Efficiency efficacy of most products had declined, and weeds once again showed regrowth 17 days after the second treatment. Some of the organic herbicides tested exhibited quick results with immediate burn down of contacted weeds observed within an hour or two. The majority of the plant damaged was observed, and then they have some data. However, most weeds also completely regrew from the base or roots 2 to 3 weeks after each application.
When you think about it, these organic weed killers are really nothing more than liquid weed whackers.
Yeah.
I mean, and weed whacking, frankly, no one loves doing it, but
No.
I would venture to say that weed whacking is a lot more efficient than spraying with clove oil in that it's going to be gone within minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
it'll be back within weeks,
Yeah.
but it's gone for now.
So, yeah, I mean, weed eating is my go-to because a lot of times if they're annuals and you've chopped them off really close to the base, they won't grow back and they're gone. If they're perennials, you've at least set them back and cleared it. And if they're setting seed, you've taken that, and yeah, it's instant. They're gone, and you're not buying the spray, mixing it up, carrying it back. I mean, you're carrying a weed eater, but I could see it if you just had a party and you're like, hey, I just need all this stuff to go away. Let me spray this oil. It's going to knock it down. But even then, it doesn't knock it down to make it go away.
Right. I mean, if it's Saturday morning and they're coming Saturday afternoon, the weed whacker is your only answer.
Yep.
Or the other answer is to put blinders on all your friends as they come in, so and a neck brace so they can't look down, left or right, and then they really won't notice the weeds.
Yeah, unless they're like me. So I went to a high school graduation yesterday, and I walked right onto campus, and there was just probably 4 feet tall lactuca in their area, and I'm like, who is not weeding on campus here?
Maybe they think it's decorative.
No, it's not decorative. So at work, we can't spray Roundup. And, we never used herbicides for our outdoor beds, really. But I can't have students weed. It was taking every hour of the students weeding. And, it just took so much time. So I told them, okay, look it. I will spray. I will save you. So I'm using a different herbicide called Change Up. It's not glyphosate, but it actually smells way worse. And of course I got it through my Tyvek suit, which is really great. But it did the same thing, I think, as these. It burned the top, and I could already see the plants going, okay, you burned me a little bit, but I'm going to rebound. So I had to go take a hula hoe anyways because it was bothering me. I don't like the look of the weeds, especially after I'm like, oh my God, now I'm taking a hula hoe and having to knock them down. Some of them it killed outright, but others, no, it still didn't. So, love it or hate it. I mean, Roundup worked.
I agree. In fact, I have learned, like I said last time, my policy is as long as the weeds aren't hurting the plant, if I can't see it, it's not there. Meaning if the other plant's over the weeds and therefore I don't see them, I'm fine with that. I will admit that there are 2 herbicides that I will use. One of them is grass getter, which is grass killer. The reason I use that because once the grass, especially Bermuda grass, gets into your beds, I mean, it's really hard to get rid of it.
It really is.
There is a Bermuda grass killer specifically for Bermuda grass, but my experience is that that's only good in a lawn because it actually kills plants in my perennial garden that the spray hits.
Yeah.
So I don't have ornamental grasses in my perennial garden specifically for that reason, because that way I can spray.
Yeah.
I use it very rarely. And the only other thing that I've used is the nutgrass spray.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is pretty much the only way to get rid of that. And it is effective. I don't believe it hurts other plants, but, those are the 2 that I'll use when I have no choice, because they're still bad things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I still don't want them on me. I still don't want to spray them. When you spray and you accidentally see like a ladybug on the plant, you're like, crap.
Yeah.
Even though it's like, oh, doesn't harm ladybug. I just sprayed this on. I mean, even if you sprayed the oil, though, that's the thing is you're spraying the oil. That's still going to kill anything on that weed as well because it's an oil.
And to make your herbicides work better, you have to buy herbicide helper, like hamburger helper, but for herbicides.
One of the sprays I use at work is actually a corn oil, peppermint oil, and cinnamon oil to kill soft-bodied insects. So,
right.
Yeah, you got to be careful. So, okay, you were going to talk about yours was the pre-emergence.
Pre-emergence. Now, I used to have a big cactus garden, and back east, the cacti that you could grow are prickly pears. You don't want to rub into those things because you'll
No.
be pulling out spines for sometimes hours.
Hmm.
So I used tons of preen in that garden, regular preen. And I probably put it in at double strength, and it was somewhat effective. Now, I've used the organic preen, which is made from the corn husk,
Yeah.
and I have essentially been completely unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And possibly, again, you have to use it at 3 times the dose, which with corn husk is certainly not going to be dangerous. But, I have this saying, which really sounds terrible, which is organic pesticides or organic herbicides, basically, they don't work,
Yeah.
And I think that the other problem, frankly, with the preen corn husk is that the particles are bigger than the regular preen.
Yeah.
But when they formulated the product, they did not change the bottles. So the particles of organic preen don't go through the little holes
Oh, that's annoying.
in the preen containers.
So what's the percentage of protein? Because it's the corn gluten protein, I think, or the corn protein has to be a high percentage for it to work. So I'm wondering, because I know you could buy bags online of it, and I'm wondering if preen is like, oh, we'll just decrease the percentage of it and sell it.
I have no idea. I will say this product has been in the market for a long
I
time because
know.
my neighbor in New York, who's organic, used to use it.
Yeah.
That's 20 years ago.
And the key with all these is they have to come in contact. So if you apply it too early and the seeds aren't germinating and we get rain, it goes right past it. Or you apply it and we don't have any rain, it's not coming in contact with the emerging seedling. So it's
And
all
I
like a
think-
timing.
Yeah, I think the regular preen is more of a chemical
Mhm. Probably
effect,
leaches
so that
out.
if it just dissolves into the soil, I think it works.
Yeah, I can you imagine? And I don't know how, like the protein, it probably has to come in contact with that granule. Because I can imagine if the protein seeps out, it's going to be super diluted. I don't even know how that would work.
Yeah, and maybe that's why you have to put it down at 3 times the dose. And by the way, the corn husk product is already twice the price,
Yeah.
more or less, of the regular preen or whatever brand you use.
I've been wanting to use the protein, but I never would thought of getting the preen because I look at the price in that bottle and I'm like, that's not,
it's
that's,
insane.
but I know you could buy, and I Googled it, and you could buy the corn protein as a pre-emergent in large bags.
And maybe that will work.
And I'm going to try that. But see, I'm always just like, oh, dang it. It rained and you have to sort of have the area clear because it has to make, you can't have layers of debris because it won't find its way. So if you have if you weed eated, say, and you have like an inch of thatch on top, you have to clear that away. So it could
how
go.
practical is that?
Well, I know it's not. That could be the reason why. I mean, so you're like, oh, I now I have to do all this work. I might as well just weed eat next year when they come up. But
I find that I like I say, I use the regular preen. I like the product. It doesn't work like it's supposed to. But for my ornamental gardens, when you get right down to it, if you have healthy soil and healthy plants, they will cover most of the
weeds.
of the soil that you have there anyway. There will be some weeds. You pick them as you see them. You're not going to have a lot, and a lot of them you won't see, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
And my vegetable garden is filled with weeds.
I did notice that. I wasn't going to say anything.
No, I mean, I have to go weed it because I'll weed it around the plants that I'm going to eat. But
it's just because I'm so hyper focused on weeds in every aspect of my life. So that's all.
I think that in a vegetable garden, they are competing.
No, it's fine. Don't come to my house because my God, I've got weeds.
It's just, weeds are part of life.
They
weeds
are.
like moles. You can't get rid of them. You might as well live with them.
You're going to have weeds. No matter where you live, they're going to come in. And really the easiest thing is if you have a small garden, hand pull them. If you have a larger garden, hula hoe, weed eat them. Smother them.
Now, when you call it a hula hoe, is that what we call a scuffle hoe?
I don't know. Does it look like a hoe, but then the center's cut out of it?
It's like a trapezoid.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a hula hoe.
That works very well.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. My student broke one the other day and I was actually there, thought I was going to be upset. I'm like, no, you really got into it and I appreciate that. So they snapped off.
And they're like weed whackers in the sense that all they do is they remove the top of the plant.
Yeah. Which works great if it's an small annual or yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you get, if your soil's soft enough, you get underneath the soil and you actually uproot it all.
Right.
If your soil is firm or the weed's big, you decapitate it. And yes, some might grow back, but they're gone, or at least they're not going to prevent seed or go to seed anytime soon because you remove that. So,
right. What I use also is what I was learned is called a hook. It's basically like a rake with 3 or 4 prongs.
oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I actually use it on its side, sort of like a scuffle
Oh, yep.
hook. 100 years ago, when I worked at Planning Fields Arboretum in New York, what they'd have us do is take the hook and use it like a scuffle hoe, and then just leave the uprooted weeds on the soil on top for it to dry out. But here it's even better because there's no rain.
There's
so
no rain. Yeah. We've all done that where we've put like uprooted something, but the roots have made contact with the soil and it's rooted right back in, or you've made a pile of weeds and they were growing from it. You're like, okay. All right, let's move on to yours.
I'm actually at my number one waste of money already.
No, you're not.
I am.
Oh, are you? Wait a minute. It's my turn.
It's your turn.
It's my turn, right? Because you did your organic pre-emergent, so it's my turn. So I have 2 left still. How did I get that?
That's because we both had homeopathic supplements.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I have 2 left. I'm going to go with rototiller. Yeah, the rototiller things, it seems like such a good idea because you're like, well, I need a plant and I need my soil to be soft and nice. Now, here's the thing with it. One, if your soil is not soft already and you rototill, that thing's going to bounce up and hit you in the face. Or you need to be like Hulk Hogan or the Incredible Hulk to be able to hold it down to get it into the soil. And then you need to go back and forth and get it deeper and deeper. And then you might be able to get 10 inches down. And then that's not ideal. So the idea of a rototiller is great if you already have fluffy soil and you're trying to incorporate some organic greens that you've just chopped down. But if you're going to go buy and spend the money on a rototiller to make a bed, it's a waste of money. And I tell people you don't need to turn over the whole entire area. Just dig up, take the native soil, mix a handful of compost, plant, cover, put compost back on, and just year after year you add compost that's going to build it up. You don't need to work the whole entire area. Even a vegetable garden, you don't need to work the whole entire area. So it really, 1, they're expensive. 2, it's very labor. I mean, I'm actually pretty strong. My back's not that great anymore, but I'm pretty strong. And man, a rototiller would kick my butt.
I've used them. And
I
first
have
of all,
one.
if you have tendonitis in your elbows, you will have tendonitis that you wouldn't believe afterwards.
Well, I've got tendonitis in my elbow from weed eating. So,
but I've used it. I actually made the mistake of trying to turn over grass with it, and it doesn't work. This is 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But they're very labor intensive. They're heavy. Moving them around, you can hurt your back.
Yes.
And because it's not like the little commercial you used to see for the I forgot the name
mantis.
Of the company.
It was the mantis. Remember the mantis?
And you have this. This is 30 years ago. So you'll have the woman in the little dress, and she's holding with one hand like a self-propelled vacuum cleaner. Yeah. And afterwards they cut the scene before the thing jumps up and hits her in the head, and she's disfigured for life.
Then what they did is they took just bags of potting soil, put them on there, and they're like, now go make this even fluffier.
I'll change the subject, but that also reminds me of the ads for the greenhouse where they're selling a greenhouse for like $99, and you see this person, and she is in the greenhouse enjoying herself, and then you look really closely and you realize this person's a 12-year-old girl.
That's how small it is. Whoops. Yes.
But anyway, I agree with you that there are people who believe that will destroy the soil.
There's that, which most of the time, if you're in a house, the soil's been destroyed. It's not native. There's fill. There's And
if your soil is wet and you rototill, you will make that soil.
Oh my God,
destroyed for a year.
Destroyed. Yeah.
If you have soil like I do, which is 6 inches of delicious compost on top of 12 feet of clay, all you'll do is you'll buy this $500 or $1,000 rototiller, you'll till it, and you will have a broken rototiller.
Yeah,
Because it's
exactly.
not going through that,
It's
and
not
it's
going
not
through
going to go
that.
through roots. So like you
It's
say,
not.
it's for previously tilled soil, and then why'd you
Yes.
buy it?
Yep, exactly. Okay, good. I'm glad we could agree on that one. Okay,
Absolutely.
so next.
Well, I'm at my number one waste of money in gardening.
Is this your number one or your bonus?
No, my number one, not my bonus.
Okay, good. Okay, yes. Okay, go ahead.
My number one waste of money in gardening, I think we might have some conflict here, is landscape fabric.
Yeah.
So, in my humble yet belligerent opinion,
Mhm.
landscape fabric is the biggest waste of money that you can put into your garden for several reasons. Number one is it really doesn't keep the weeds down long term. Landscape fabric, there are different types. There are some that are woven plastic, there are some that are fiber. But essentially, the point of them is to keep the weeds from sprouting through the landscape fabric and being visible in your garden. The problem is that every year you're going to get debris and good stuff falling on top of your landscape fabric. And that will become beautiful, wonderful compost, which is what I have on top of the landscape fabric in my new house. And it is filled with weeds. So it stops weeds in the short term. It does not stop them in the long term. In addition, it prevents all the organic particles, especially for the really thick landscape fabrics, from going down into the soil below. So that soil becomes leaner and leaner until it, essentially, in my case, it was probably clay to begin with, but now it's rock hard clay. So, and removing it is the worst thing you could burden you can place on the people who buy the house after you.
Yes, that is true. Yes, we've all been there where we've find this plastic and it's like, when does it end? You start pulling it up and there's just pieces. Now, I will say I would not use it in any of my garden beds. Where I use it is in my walkways. So I use it between my raised beds and the vegetable garden. I have the woven stuff. And it took me a while. I said, do I want to use this? And I said, yes, I do, because I need to minimize weeds as much as possible. And correct, every spring, because it's been down there and I put thick wood chips on top. Of course, as the wood chips break down, as I pull a plant out and soil ends up on it, leaves fall down. Yeah, it's more organic on top, but the weeds are so easy to pull out. And it's way less than if I didn't have it. So in areas where there are pathways, around raised beds, or I don't want weeds anytime, then that is where I use it. I don't use the black plastic. And where I'm using it now is the beds for my annual flowers.
Are you using it on the walkways or the actual beds?
In this plot of area, I'm doing annual flowers and I'm actually doing peppers because there's a big Bermuda area and lots of weeds. It's not keeping the Bermuda out. It's popping up through the little holes where I'm planting. So the water drains through on the woven stuff. So the water goes through. So that was a must, because if I laid the drip line, I have to have water go through. But no, if I had like a garden, there's no way, because you're not allowing all the organic debris, the compost, to break down into it. And you do get that separation of nice organic, and then you take it off, you have that slick top because nothing's been added to it. So no, I agree. In certain situations, it works great. But no, I wouldn't use it in a permanent garden bed. No.
And I actually say that if you're going to use it, you use it in a place where you never, ever expect to try to grow anything. My neighbor is actually he's putting down rock where he used to have a bed of ivy. And I said, well, just be sure you never ever want to plant there. There are issues with putting rock down instead of just say bark in an area you never want to plant anything, which is that rock will collect heat and it will actually make your property less comfortable as it re-radiates the heat.
And then the rock eventually finds its way into the soil. Then when you're digging, and then if you do rototill, those rocks are going to hit that rototill blade and shoot up and catch you.
And guess what's going to happen to the rocks? Soil is going to fall into those rocks or leaves, and they're going to break down, and you're going to get tons of weeds. And you cannot use a scuffle hoe on rock.
No, you can't. Okay, my
What's
last.
your number one?
Well, no, remember, they're not in any particular order. So,
Okay.
remember, so the bonus one is sort of the big ticket one. These were in no particular order. I didn't do them in any order.
Oh, I just left the worst for last.
Oh, did you? Okay. No, because this last one isn't a big deal for me. And if someone mentions it, I say no, but I still see it for sale. Fertilizer tree stakes.
Ah, yes.
They're just so bizarre. Like you click them together and they sound like drumsticks. It's like this weird thing. And it's like, why all of a sudden these tree stakes fertilizer? You just shove them down in there. Now, if you have a mature tree, it's been established, you don't need to fertilize it. It's getting everything, especially if you let, organic debris fall down on the ground, the roots are far out, they're doing its thing. You don't need to fertilize a mature tree. If you have a young tree, same idea. The roots are going out to your native soil, put compost on top. And the idea is you take those fertilizer stakes and you shove it down and it's dissolving. And so if you think about it, the highest concentration of fertilizer, whatever roots are right by it, is going to get this huge dose. And as you mentioned, fertilizer's a salt. Salt burns. So you could have all these little feeder roots just cooking right there. My opinion is you really don't need to fertilize anything that's in the ground if you add compost and you have a nice, ecosystem. And you definitely don't need to fertilize mature trees, and you really don't need to even fertilize trees that you're putting in the ground. So that's my feeling.
I actually agree with you on that. I think there's a feel-good factor
for all this.
I like to use liquid fertilizer because I feel it's instant.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't instantly affect the plant, but it's instant in that it goes right to the roots immediately. I will fertilize trees that I've just planted.
Okay.
That season, I actually did add some powdered citrus fertilizer to my tangerines this year because they were turning yellow and they were only planted last year. So I felt that it might help them. And I do fertilize my young palms when they're small because palms are so slow growing that during the growing season, I want to push them as much as possible so that it can get enough strength in the plant to get through the winter because I'm growing marginally hardy plants.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we fertilize at work in pots, of course. That's And so it's not a bad thing. It's just the fertilizer stakes just are so really strong, especially for those little roots right there.
Yes. So, and I've seen where they have these injectors where you stick it in the ground, but it's still the same thing. It's high concentration in one spot. So where it works too hard, and where it doesn't work, it probably too far.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're to our extra bonus. It doesn't have to be, did I say big ticket one?
You did say the big money waste of money.
Okay. I wonder if ours is going to be the same.
Oh, you want to go first?
No, you go first.
Oh, okay. Okay. Even though I have one, a pergola.
Oh, yeah, you have a great one.
Why do I think pergolas are a waste of money? I love my pergola, but the problem is people buy pergolas and they say, wow, I bought this giant pergola and I'm not going to be hot anymore. And my plants are going to be shaded and they're going to be gloriously happy. And the answer is no, that's not how they work. On my pergola, when I first got it, before I added the shading to it, which we'll talk about, it was still insanely hot out there because the sun still hits you. The slats are maybe 2 inches wide and 12 inches apart. So sure, they're cutting down on 1/6, which is 16% of the light, not enough to make you comfortable. So that's number one. And number two is they are not going to do anything to make your plants happier humidity-wise because they're not increasing humidity.
No.
So for my pergola, what I did is I added in shade cloth. I think I have 50% shade cloth, which stays on the year round. And I put in a misting system.
Yeah.
So now when I'm under my pergola, the plants are not burning because the shade cloth and the misting system has two effects. One is it adds the humidity somewhat, but not a lot to the plants, but it keeps me cooler when it's running. So if you buy a pergola by itself and spend upwards of $10,000 or $20,000 on these things, you need to spend the extra few $100s to make it do what you want it
Yeah.
to do, which is to shade your plants or and cool you off.
Yeah.
I will also say they're pretty.
Oh, no, I mean, yours is spectacular, and you even have fans in it. So your plants are
yes.
getting airflow.
Again,
Yeah.
you need to put fans in too.
Yeah.
So they're not
Yeah.
magic. That's what I'm really getting
No,
at.
you added shade cloth, and I think you have to add the structure's there. So if you take it off and you get more sun in the winter, if you wanted, and then in the summer you put on. So it's it's very comfortable. I mean, I was at your house today, and it was very tropical feeling.
And so the reason I say it's the biggest waste of money, if you spend, I didn't spend 10,000, but if you spend 10,000 on a pergola and you do nothing more, you're going to regret that you regret it because it's not doing anything that you wanted it to do other than it looks pretty.
Yeah, and sometimes it traps the heat, especially if you don't have the airflow. It can actually trap the heat under, so it feels hotter.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're going to put one in, spend the extra, let's say $700 or $800 if you do it yourself, or a couple of thousand if you hire an electrician. Get fans, get a misting system, make sure you use outdoor fans, get a shade cloth, and you will be so much happier.
Okay. All right. Okay. Mine's similar, but not. Mine is drum roll. And that was my drum roll. My big ticket, the biggest waste of money for big ticket item would be a greenhouse.
I figured you were going there.
Yeah. So I was wondering, because I mean, that's the biggest one. And as plant growers now, I work in greenhouses and I'm around greenhouses all the time, but I also live in a very hot, dry climate. Now, most greenhouses, unless you're going to get one, now here's the thing. If you're going to buy one, you have to get it large enough that you could have a cooling system. And that could be a standalone AC unit. That could be a giant swamp cooler, or like what big greenhouses have, what we have are the wet pads and the vents. So you have a wet pad, water flows down on one side, and then you have the fans that turn on and just pull it across. So it's cooling that way. Those are what the big greenhouses have. But most people can't afford one like that. So they buy, say, an 8x10 or 8x12, and it doesn't come with a cooling system. And in the summer, if it gets above 90, 85, your plants are going to cook. There's some mitigating things you could do, yes, but it requires cooling. So then you have to buy an AC unit or a swamp cooler, and you have to run it consistently and all the time, and that is expensive. I picked up a collection of orchids and nepenthes from a gentleman who passed, and he had an 8x12 greenhouse. He had it in the shade. It was under a large tree, and he had a misting system. So once again, you're mentioning the misting. Plants could take heat as long as they have consistent moisture, especially tropical plants, because that's what they want. But that's expensive as well, and you have to run the mist system constantly. And so if you're going to grow, even my friend, Gianluca, Gianluca, he's a succulent grower, and he had all these greenhouses for his succulents, and he had, some of his succulents, he had to move out in the summertime because it was too hot for succulents in the summer. So he would open the doors, but then he had to get cooling system. So really, when people say, "Oh, I want a greenhouse," they start gardening. They're like, "I want a greenhouse." You got to figure out why you want it. If you want to grow just your tomatoes and start your tomatoes and your vegetables in February instead of like March, sure.
Get yourself a nice fluorescent light.
Exactly. Because if you're trying to grow orchids or tropical plants, and trust me, so many of my friends have greenhouses and had greenhouses. And, one of them I've even like, okay, because then the opposite end is the heating in the winter, which is almost harder because you could do the misters, you could open the vents, you could shade cloth in the summer. In the winter, these plants are not going to be happy. Some of them don't take temperatures below 50 or 40. So unless you heat it, and I know people put the room heaters, that's expensive. I even mentioned one, I'm like, why don't you guys do a wood burning fireplace in there and close it? And actually he almost thought about it because those things put out heat. So I'm not saying no. I'm just saying, think about why you want a greenhouse.
Right.
Because it's, especially in a hot, dry climate like ours, or if you're in a really cold environment, it's not going to be a year-round perfect setup, especially if one's small. So we had a friend who they bought the 5 acres, they got the chickens, they got the goats, and they're all into it. And they bought the most beautiful wood cedar greenhouse ever. I'm like, why? I'm like, what are you guys going to do with it? So,
I had a greenhouse in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I had three.
Yeah.
Three different permutations. The first one was 6x8.
Yeah.
And had no heat. I actually blew the air from the house into the greenhouse.
Yeah.
And I lost every could do a bacterial rot in the winter. The second was 14x14 inflatable greenhouse.
Whoa.
And it had a heater.
Nice.
Gas heater. And the third was the monster greenhouse, which was 16x32
There you
and
go.
16 feet tall. Because the bigger they are, the easier they are to maintain.
That was huge, Bruce.
It was huge. In fact, one morning I woke up and I heard the police in the backyard, and I figured they thought I was growing marijuana. This is back in the aughts. Turns out there was a gas leak in the neighbor's pool, and they thought it was me.
Oh, yeah.
But in any case, I had to have a cooling system, and of course, where you live where it's humid, evaporative coolers don't work that well. That's what I used because it was better than nothing.
Yeah.
It was super loud because it was a fan basically with a sprayer on it. The heating costs in the winter for my house plus the greenhouse. Now, this is an area where it goes down to 10 degrees pretty much at least 5 to 10 times a winter, and single digits at least once or twice a winter. My average heating costs for December, January, February were $1,000 a month.
Oh,
includes the house.
But still, yeah.
$1,000 a month.
Yeah.
It was to grow orchids. My summer electric bills weren't insane because it wasn't an AC.
Yeah.
But I will say that I loved it. It was a great greenhouse.
Yeah. That sounds fabulous.
The cost of operating a greenhouse, wherever you are, unless you're in a place where you don't need a greenhouse, then it's
cheap.
You
don't need a greenhouse.
If you live in Hawaii, the cost of operating a greenhouse is really cheap because you take all the glass off.
I know.
It's insane. You have to be devoted. And here, I can't even imagine. I have a space for greenhouse. I won't do it because I don't want to deal with it hitting 120 degrees or more if the electric goes out.
Yeah, I would say when we had our last house built, we had a plant room attached to it. And I did the same thing. I heated it by opening. It was attached to the front door. It's beautiful. It looked like the entryway. So I opened the front door and then opened the window that looked into it. And that warmed it enough.
Right. And then, I have a plant room, and you
have a plant room.
It has fluorescent, it has LED lighting. The plants grow fine, not perfect, but fine.
Yeah.
And, I love greenhouses.
Yeah.
I don't either.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I think the question is, what do you want it for before you go and you buy it? And then are you prepared for all the extras and the cost for it? And then what size is going to make it work for you? So, this guy who's growing the nepenthes and the orchids, he had a system. It worked for him. But if you're just like, oh, I want to grow tomatoes year round, that might work, but if you're like, oh, I want to grow these incredibly tropical plants year round, you got to really look into some of the costs, like you said. Wow. I didn't know you had one that big. I need to see pictures of that.
Yeah, and since we might as well talk about the costs because it's amazing. I took a home equity loan on my house to put this up. This is now 2000 is when I think I planted this, built this, maybe 2002. So we're talking 23 years ago. So just think of inflation.
Yeah.
The greenhouse itself, I got from BC Greenhouses in British Columbia. It was a beautiful greenhouse. It was $22,000 just for the greenhouse.
Yeah.
Putting in an automatic not an automatic watering system, the automatic humidity system. Putting in the heater and the backup heater, because believe it or not, one night in November when it was 20 degrees, my primary heater went and I would have lost the plants. Maybe it was December. Yeah. So I had 2 heaters. Each one cost $500 just for the heater. I had to have electric pulled into the system and had an electric box. I had to have gas from the house into the greenhouse so I could have the gas for it. Yeah. And I had a propane tank for the backup heater.
Oh my God. And then all the permits, I'm sure that you had to get.
Oh, and the plants. It cost $55,000 23 years ago. It was great, but $55,000 is a lot of trips to Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. No, they're
And
not.
I
They're not
was.
cheap. They're not. They're not cheap. No,
They're not cheap.
they're
Plus
not cheap.
$1,000 a
Mhm.
month in the winter.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, that's extreme, but I mean, that's how you got yours to work.
And,
Yeah.
it worked great because
Yeah.
I could go away for a week, and
Uh-huh.
if they didn't need watering,
Yeah.
they were fine, even
Yeah.
in the middle of summer or the middle of winter because I had backup heaters.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so that was a good list. We had a good list.
yeah,
I
I
think
think we do have a
I
good
think
list.
I think we educated people. We saved them money. I like to think so.
Maybe even 20,000, maybe even
Yeah, maybe
$55,000.
55,000. Someone was like, "Dang, I was just about to buy a 16 by 32-foot greenhouse. I guess I won't now."
By the way, I had fruiting bananas in that
Oh my
greenhouse.
god! Of course you did. Yeah, that ceiling height is amazing.
Oh, it was great.
Yeah.
I had to use a harness to work on the ceiling.
Oh my god. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to do another top 10 next month, and we'll think about it. Yeah, maybe I'll ask input what people want to hear. I mean, there's top 10. It's endless what we could talk about.
Oh,
There could
sure,
be top
because
10 of it,
basically it's a
anything.
list of things we like or a
I
list of
mean,
things we don't like.
yeah,
There's
exactly.
plenty of those.
Yeah, I mean everything. So if you have a suggestion, you could leave it at Marlene the Plant Lady on Instagram or Facebook, and you could email me if you have a question or a comment at marlenetheplantlady@gmail.com. And Bruce has a new email, Bruce
I
the
do.
Botanist.
It's Bruce the Botanist at yahoo.com.
Oh, Yahoo! You're still on Yahoo. Look at you.
I actually have another account. It's the same account I've had for 35 years on Yahoo.
Yeah. And then a big favor is, of course, if you like the podcast, please give us a review, a positive one. And you could do that on Spotify and Apple because that actually gets just people when they're searching to see the podcast more. And Bruce, you want to say goodbye before I do a sign off?
I don't have a goodbye yet, so I'll just say see you next week or next podcast.
Next podcast. And I will say, until next time, everyone, happy gardening.